Thank you, Nakayama-san. That was wonderful and a great way to kick off the day. Do I click on this? Which other? Oh, this clicker. This one? Okay. Which button do I push, Adam? Hello. All right, so I'm going to give a presentation I've given in parts before. Some of you may have seen some of these slides, so don't make faces at me. But the official title for my talk is Data-Driven Disruption and the Fight for Data Ownership. I'm having clicker, but the alternative title, given that we're in Rome, is Sic Transit Gloria Mundi, or The Upcoming War for Data Ownership, the Disruption of Industries We Grew Up With, or How I Stopped Worrying and Got with the Internet. And this Latin expression, given that we're in Rome, in English is, thus passes the glory of the world. And it originally comes from when the Pope was coronated. He would stop 3 times in the procession. They would wash his feet and remind him that he was mortal and he would come and go. I think there's a message in this for all of these great companies that we look at around us, like Facebook, like Google, even like Apple. And the message here today of this presentation, I hope in the different themes in the day, is not only is the internet and the various aspects of distributed data processing disrupting traditional industries, but the trends are moving so quickly across even the data-driven industries that we can name that I don't think anyone can be assured in 5 years' time what we see today in the market will still be the same. Data, as Nakayama-san pointed out, is everywhere. And those of you who were at the LINE event in Tokyo saw this, one of my favorite jokes, so I keep telling it. How much is your privacy worth? Let's talk about data and privacy for a second. And the answer is Facebook's market cap. This is a slide from, from the hearings when Facebook's data breach took out. Orrin Hatch asked Mark Zuckerberg, how do you sustain a business where you don't charge users for anything? Your standard dumb boy question. And Zuckerberg, without any expression, goes, well, Senator, we run ads. And fast forward a few months later, then this happened. This is from last week. Tim Cook was speaking at the EU. He coined the phrase, the data industrial complex. And he said in his speech, our own information from the everyday to the deeply personal is being weaponized against us with military efficiency. Today, that trade has exploded. Apple has a lot of reasons for doing this. Tim Cook personally has a lot of reasons for doing this. I don't believe he's just exploiting privacy for commercial gain for Apple. I do believe that he has a deep-seated personal belief that data should be treated with respect to the consumer's needs and desires and so on and so forth. But looking back over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of different things have happened to really bring us to this point. One, the various privacy scandals, not only with data breaches and so on from Facebook and others, all the talk of fake news, election tampering, and so on and so forth have really rocked the world and caused anyone who can write their name to think deeply about the droppings they're leaving behind on the internet. GDPR has also put fear in people's hearts, not individuals, not consumers, but in the hearts of corporations. We'll come back to that later. More data is available online today than ever. Nakayama-san pointed out that, in the old days, everything was memoryless. Everything was done with paper, and there was no real record. Of course, there's a tremendous amount of convenience that comes from Google watching you and learning about everything you do, and that it can suggest to you what you're going to do next. But the line between that and really horrible things happening is very, very thin. And the more that you see artificial intelligence being applied to these distributed data sets, the more you see data being held in the hands of people who you didn't vote for or didn't empower, the scarier the situation becomes. On the same theme, IoT promises that trillions of sensors will report data to more data platforms. This will make life better in a lot of cases, but it'll make the problems around data ownership a lot worse. And of course, no one really treats data securely. no one is really applying rights management to data in a consistent and standard way, which means that security breaches, many of which are very serious, are growing by the day. In the old days, if you think of the internet, it was just kind of this big bucket full of data. People used to think that data just wants to be a free-roaming fluid. This was considered pretty much an unqualified good thing. I mean, I think everybody here knows that this is not the case. Data is a window into our lives. We want to trade it, we may want to share it, but this has to be done in a trusted way, or really bad things will happen. I was scribbling down some notes when I was writing this talk, and I sort of was trying to think through the various chains here. You start with privacy. Of course, that starts to beg policy around the way people are treating information generally as a society, which leads us to start thinking of how all of this relates to the internet and data being everywhere. Then there's a danger of a counter-reaction, a counter-revolution, which is why I have a picture of the French revolutionary Danton. And all of this led me to really think that in order to do this right, we can't just shut down what's happening. There's just too much convenience being generated. We have to really take the approach of being audacious in how we implement solutions. We may be forced to pull back on what's been going on at places like Google and Facebook, either through regulation like GDPR, but at the same time, we can't kill the good things that come with it. GDPR took place last May. It's very simple at its root, pretty much, and you'll hear from Thomas and his panel much more about this. Thomas will also give a talk about this later. The fundamental of GDPR is don't track people without their explicit permission. This is the kind of thing Google's mother should have told them about. Of course, not everybody listens to their mother. And the second tenet is always take people's rights and freedom into account when processing data. This is a familiar concept, at least in Western democracies. It may not be a familiar concept in other places in the world, but anyone who's had their privacy violated anywhere on the planet will tell you it's not cool. And of course, if you're exploiting people's data, you must be accountable for your actions. This stuff does not happen in the middle of the night. It does not happen anonymously. People who handle data must serve the people whose data they're handling. GDPR will have deep ramifications for all industries, not just the data industries we know today. Some will tell you that GDPR was created as a curse on the house of Facebook. Ironically, Facebook and Google are probably best equipped to deal with it, given the fact that they have highly programmable data platforms and can move around and dodge the bullets much faster than, say, a car company or an energy company that's handling vast amounts of personal information and may not have the complexity in their IT departments to actually handle all of the requirements of GDPR. Basically, anyone tracking European citizens, not just in Europe, but all over the planet, if you have one European citizen's worth of data, you're on the hook. And this could endanger your revenue, this could endanger your business. So any industry that's based on data analysis must really improve their game or face death. Corporations across the spectrum have to grab data by the horns and use it for strategic leverage. Again, I said earlier, I don't think this is a question of saying we've gone too far, let's throw the kill switch. Data processing, data-driven industry is here to stay, and the people across industries, across vertical markets who know how to exploit the power of their data and build value chains around that data will win. Unfortunately, current data platforms are built like big buckets. In B2C applications, they're just built to support the platform owner's business. Facebook's a great example of that. In B2B, for example, in IoT, they're often custom-built, single application platforms biased towards one party's interests. I'll give an example of that in a few slides. These data platforms are not programmable. They're not designed for dynamic, multi-party, secure transaction flow. People, enterprises, and governments are now beginning to take these problems very seriously. Modern data platforms that are now emerging can store vast amounts of both first and third-party data. The potential to combine those threads gives the owner of the platform phenomenal insight power into the patterns that exist in these platforms. The way this data is analyzed is often well beyond the data provider's intentions. You may be innocently thinking that you're looking for a location of a restaurant on a map, but between that and your Android phone and the variety of other Google tools you're using, Google can tell more about you than even you know. In business-to-business applications, this will lead platform companies attempting to co-opt the value chain. I'll come back to that. But in the consumer space, the long-term effects of privacy violations are only just beginning to be felt. We may be surreptitiously creating a totalitarian system around ourselves where the totalitarians themselves are invisible. So what are we trying to do about it at Intertrust? Well, we're advocating this position that rather than dumping your data into a big hard disk in the sky, you have to create a digital doppelganger, a digital twin of your company or of yourself. Data-driven businesses, as they're called, touch all verticals. What we've seen over the last 20 years, and this is a natural pattern with disruptive technologies, that media and entertainment and banking have been the first to feel the impact of these trends. But they usually lead the pack, and everybody else follows. So those of you at a car company or those of you at an energy company should be looking very closely at the lessons that the music industry went through when they first met the internet. Any company on the internet will transact or is transacting on data. So protecting and managing the data becomes critical, but that doesn't mean locking it up. If you play your cards right, vast opportunities for better margins, new business models, and so on exist, but you've got to start thinking of data as property. Now, there's a lot of people walking around trying to tell you that their platform is the best platform and you should use it, and oftentimes it's free. But there's the old saying, beware of Greeks bearing gifts, which relates to the Trojan horse, not the man on the donkey, but I thought this was a funny picture. You have to keep in mind that not everyone offering a data platform has clean hands. General Electric, which is now in a bit of trouble, had this product called Predix. Predix was this cloud AI platform that they sold to airlines and energy companies and so on and so forth. Their deal was they would show up at an airline and they would say, why don't you get all of your IoT jet engines to speak to Predix? We're going to tell you exactly how all of the jet engines are working. We're going to make your operations better, but. Your average big airline has jet engines from multiple vendors. So the standard response was, well, wait a minute. GE has a jet engine division. We don't feel very good about giving you the information on Pratt & Whitney engines. I've lost my screen here. I'll just do this. Adam, how do I make this go back?
Push down on the arrow.
So there was a fundamental value chain conflict here. Predix is for sale, by the way. It's been a complete failure. I think they're going to leave it at a petrol station and drive away at some point. But this is going to be the first of many of these instances that you see where a company thought they were smarter than the average bear. They put together a platform that they thought could co-opt data from a wide variety of people, including their competitors, so they could improve their own operation. Well, people turned out to be smarter. I have many other examples of this. In the last 5 years, we've seen a series of moves to annex data via these proprietary data platforms. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what happens to a world where digital property exists, but there are no walls? Data interoperability, trust, and security become critical to success. The inside-outside model of security that people have employed since the birth of computing doesn't work. You have to assume that anywhere data goes, it has to be protected and governed. So the Intertrust philosophy is to use what we call trusted data platforms. We believe that data has to be persistently protected wherever it goes. It has to be governed in accordance with its owner's wishes. The data has to be managed contextually, because a piece of data in front of Mr. A is very different than a piece of data, the same piece of data in front of Mr. B. The idea of programmable contextual adaptation of data usages across a value chain is critical to create a data economy. All data and users who touch the data have to be trusted. They have to be authenticated. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of people in Belarus commenting on who's the better person to vote for president. We have to enable trusted intermediaries, people who everybody trusts to stand in between people transacting in a value chain to avoid conflicts of interest like the one I just talked about with General Electric. If you do this right, trusted data can be fluid. It's just the fluid is gated through a set of pipes that have taps that can be trusted to turn on and off at the right time. Every bit in a trusted data platform matters. But if we place our data in these platforms, we can add layers on business that allow you to really create a distributed network of data between different value chain actors where specialists can come up and really serve the right data set, the right person at the right time. Industries that will be impacted by these trends include energy, auto, consumer, agriculture, health. Nakayama-san mentioned a whole bunch of others. Pretty much the entire economy will be transformed through these technologies and through these platforms. We spend a lot of time working in energy. We're seeing a fundamental transformation in the energy space. You look at countries like Germany, where deregulation in renewable energy has completely eviscerated the traditional grip that power companies used to have on their business. And they're adapting rapidly in a world where electrons not only cost less than they used to before, but in some cases are free, and in some cases you're paid to use them. The question then becomes, how does an energy company maintain its business in a world like this? And of course, our answer is, every time you burn an electron, information is created, so you become a data management company using the electrons as a hook to bring people into your business. In the 1990s, we saw electronic commerce. Today, we're seeing electron commerce. And if power companies don't play their cards right, and I go back to an earlier point I made about existing data companies moving into traditional business, this is going to happen. We're already beginning to see Amazon moving into all sorts of markets. They started as a book company that sold paper books on the internet. They went to a company that sold everything on the internet, to a company that sold digital books on the internet. Now they actually have bookstores. They own supermarkets. They're beginning to sell insurance. And there's no reason why they can't sell electricity, especially in a deregulated market. So, going back to what we've been talking about, trusted data platforms have great promise by making more data available for use. Consumer services that lower the risk that our data is used to exploit us will be available. Rapid advances in medical research and other areas will emerge from the availability of data to the right people at the right time. Obviously, consumer value will be created. We'll see an optimization of worldwide energy production and use, and much more effective food production and distribution across the planet, all driven by distributed data sets being managed by the right people at the right time. With that, I'll hand over to the first panel. I think Stephen Comello from Stanford will moderate a panel of experts from different industries who will pick up on these themes and carry on. Thank you.